Hi, I'm Robert. Welcome to my channel. This is a reading of my latest book, My Nineveh, The Cross Between Psychedelics and the Church. It is available now on Amazon. If you like this work and would like to support me, please like and subscribe, and consider purchasing a copy from the link in the description below. Chapter 5, Psychedelics. I developed a fascination with psychedelics early on in life once I recognized that the vast majority of the music and art I loved was inspired by their use. The Beatles' "Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds" was a favorite song and an obvious nod to LSD. The Beatles deny the influence, attributing it to Alice in Wonderland, but even that is a psychedelic-influenced work of art, magic mushrooms being the dominant theme. Even at an early age, I saw psychedelics as a part of my future. What is this experience, and why is it held so strangely in the public perception? The hippie movement of the 60s and 70s was a colorful and artistic expression of the human experience. Rather than psychedelics being embraced, the fear in the culture forced an end to the era. There were always rumors of a psychedelic underground, but being a relative square and a long since age out of the party scene at the time of Tom's death, my access was limited. As my brother Tom was going through his various therapies with one failure after another, the question of psychedelic use as a potential therapy grew more and more in my mind. Tom had developed a fear of psychedelic substances, blaming his bipolar disorder on cannabis usage. His treatments involved a whole host of antidepressants, light therapies, and counseling. The substance that did the most good was lithium, but even that couldn't cure the hell he was experienced with both the depression and manic phases of his condition. Ultimately, he was unwilling to try anything outside of the prescriptions given him by the medical complex. Perhaps fear of doing more harm to his psyche chained him to the wisdom of experts. My parents often talked to me about his suicidal ideation, and slowly over time, we all made our peace with the fact that he would probably take his own life. It was always my hope that he would develop a willingness to try psychedelics as a last-ditch effort before doing the irreversible, but it was not to be. To me, psychedelics remained a rock unturned, a potential untapped therapy, a lifeline not thrown. Conventional wisdom, what little there was of psychedelics, dictates that giving psychedelics to those who are suffering with a mental disorder likely has bad outcomes. Suffice it to say, that reasoning has always fallen flat with me. I'm not sure how much worse you can do than suicide. My grief at Tom's passing only heightened my curiosity. What were these substances? Why was their use considered such a threat to society that they remained classified as a Schedule I substance? I could see the damage that opioids cause to society, but the vast majority of them, including the very potent fentanyl, is Schedule II. Overdoses were a very common occurrence among those who developed a dependence on opioids, and the stats on the destruction of those lives didn't lie. However, despite the rhetoric, there was very little information justifying the banning of psychedelic substances. The largest hurdle seemed to be a public perception of fear, with little to no corroborating evidence. The fact that cannabis, a widely used medical plant, is still Schedule I should tell you all you need to know about the accuracy and purpose of the scheduling system. In America, Schedule I substances have three identifying factors. 1. A high potential for abuse. 2. No currently acceptable medical treatment in the U.S. And 3. A lack of acceptable safety for use under medical supervision. I dove into the literature on these substances. Rather than fall under the definitions necessary for a Schedule I categorization, it seemed that psychedelics were reflexively banned as a knee-jerk response to the culture war of that time. Meanwhile, there were plenty of studies going on in the 1960s showing that they had very low potential for abuse and plenty of up-and-coming medical treatments for their use under a doctor's supervision. The story of them as a threat to the American way of life and subsequent scheduling was just another narrative lie, pushed to maintain power. I became increasingly disillusioned with the wisdom of experts, especially those of our political class. The people managing our society seemed to be managing it into the ground. The captains were steering the Titanic into the iceberg. and so I lost my faith in the laws created by these people, particularly around drugs. I decided to become an outlaw. At this point in my life, I was 37 years old. I had been happily married for 15 years, though my own struggles with depression have since ended that, and I had four lovely children, now five. My previous drug experience was limited to cannabis. I enjoyed a small amount to help me get to sleep. Cannabis is still illegal in the state of my residence, but I had grown my own in secret, ignoring the stupid laws that fit my libertarian views. All of this is to indicate the type of person that I am: free thinking, responsible, but ultimately a very unconnected person. I do not trust the black market any more than I trust lawmakers. If I was going to undertake gaining access to psychedelics, I was going to have to learn how to grow or extract the chemicals myself. There are a few requirements I had in mind for choosing my first foray into psychedelics. 1. It must be obtainable in a relatively short amount of time, weeks, not months. 2. It would not arouse suspicion, no strange odors or precursor chemicals. And 3. It must be able to be created by an intelligent person following directions, but with no special expertise needed. These requirements ruled out many psychedelics. For example, I was in no position to synthesize LSD or any of its derivatives, MDMA, or any of the other popular research chemicals. I was never a partier and had no idea how to find a hookup in my area, so the vast majority of psychedelics were off limited from the get-go. My family wasn't going to travel to the Amazon for ayahuasca, and I didn't have the patience to spend 3 months growing magic mushrooms, at least to begin. The psychedelic which ticked all the boxes was N,N-dimethyltryptamine, more commonly known as NN-DMT or just DMT. DMT is a very common chemical in a wide range of plants and animals, and can be extracted from certain root barks in a relatively simple process using commonly available chemicals. The experience, or trip, lasts approximately 15 minutes, which I thought of as a bonus as someone worried about a bad trip. I did my research, found some well-reviewed extraction instructions, bought the necessary chemicals, and ordered some root bark from Hawaii. Within 2 weeks, and for less than $100, I had the necessary ingredients for hundreds of trips. The extraction process takes about 2 days to complete, with much of that time being spent waiting in steps for precipitation and evaporation. For me, that meant 2 days of cautious optimism and the excitement of seeing DMT crystals in the bottom of a glass tray. I had created one of the world's most powerful psychedelic substances in my basement. It would be another 2 weeks before I was brave enough to try this molecule. I decided to start small, 5 to 10 milligrams, vaporized and inhaled. I put a lot of effort into creating an optimal set and setting. It was a weekend. The kids were in bed, the lights were low, with soft, comfortable music playing in the background. My wife was next to me, and my best friend at that time was on Skype watching over me. Everything was right with the world. I could feel some anxiety as I put the glass to my lips and inhaled the milky vapor. There was the mild smell of burnt plastic, and I could feel an energy in my body similar to pins and needles, but accelerated 1,000-fold. The world around me immediately flattened and a fractal pattern emerged from every surface. I could hear a high-pitched whine in my ears and felt a euphoric relaxation take over my body. The experience lasted 5 minutes or so, the equivalent of dipping my toe into the ocean. I could sense that there was much more to be experienced at higher doses, and already my mind was blown at what had occurred. It was a strangely familiar experience and very non-threatening, even as it left me questioning the nature of this consensus reality I found myself in. What does it mean when the world I accept as reality can be distorted almost beyond recognition in an instant and restored back to normalcy in the next? What is normal? And how can something measured in 1,000th of a gram do this to my 220-pound self? I needed to know more. In my studies on the DMT molecule, I had learned that it had a very short duration in the human body due to its immediate metabolization. This meant that waiting even 30 minutes or so would return one completely back to baseline without a tolerance buildup. I ran through a mental checklist to verify I felt exactly as I had before the experience. I did so, so I decided to go back for more. A slightly larger dose, but still very small dose. I loaded up 10 to 15 milligrams of DMT into the vaporizer, quelled my anxiety, and inhaled. This time, the effects were more noticeable. Rather than a distorted world, to my astonishment, my entire reality was replaced with a cube-like structure of waving lines. It felt as though there were another unseen entity there welcoming me. This space felt like a waiting room, a celestial foyer of something much greater. Again, there was the feelings of euphoria and body vibration that accompanied this journey into the unknown. At this point, the amount of questions I had far outpaced the answers. Here I was, 37 years old, surrounded my whole life by Christians and God believers, well versed in science and technology, and no one in my entire life mentioned that these experiences I was having were even possible. It is as though there's a hidden universe that exists simultaneously with our own, and not only do people not know about it, to suggest it exists is viewed as crazy. The absolute absurdity of the whole thing is that it is so easily testable. These molecules exist in our universe. I held them in my hand, and they are in an unexplored part of our reality nearly everyone is unaware of. The closest analogy I can come to explaining my thinking at this time is the invention of the microscope. Imagine living in 1590. Up until then, the smallest object any human had ever seen would have been about the size of the width of a human hair, or perhaps a single grain of sand. Then along comes Zacharias Jansen, who, to paraphrase, says, "If you only look through this tube, you will see a whole world of beings and objects that exist everywhere all the time, but are completely invisible to you under normal circumstances." Is this person a crackpot? Or a visionary at the cutting edge of a new understanding of reality? Now, I'm not claiming to have discovered DMT or any other psychedelic, but our cultural attitudes towards these substances are remarkably superstitious. I am convinced that this is related directly to the predominant metaphysics of scientific materialism. If it can't be studied by multiple people from a third-person perspective, it isn't real. The psychedelic experience is entirely within one's consciousness, which leaves it, by definition, outside the realm of objectivity. Therefore, according to scientific reasoning, it cannot be real. Unfortunately, this line of thinking almost immediately runs into problems. The thinking itself, qualia, and our very sense of being. That which we are is a subjective experience, completely outside the realm of inquiry from the scientific method. Sure, I can ask you what you feel, but I cannot verify with any experiment that your feelings are the same as mine. Do you see colors the same way I do? The existence of color blindness suggests maybe not. Do you feel pain the same way I do? It is well known in the scientific literature that redheads are more sensitive to thermal pain and less sensitive to other forms of pain. Anesthesiologists have to take this into account when sedating those who have two copies of the MC1R gene, the same gene responsible for crimson hair, who typically require more drugs to put them under. Scientists know the genes linked to these differences, but the genes are different from the first-person experience. It is clear we overlap, but equally clear that there are wide differences in our subjective experiences. It is impossible to prove that the subjective feeling of qualia is the same from one person to the next. All that to say, scientists have a consistency problem. None of us doubt the reality of thoughts, emotion, and qualia as real. To do so is insanity, because that is our direct experience of reality. However, when it comes to these other experiences within consciousness, conventional scientific wisdom dismisses them as unreal, labeling them as hallucinations and creating whole diagnoses around these experiences. It is not our understanding of these altered states that is wrong. No, it is you, your brain, your biology that is broken. We cannot classify these experiences as real because we cannot independently verify they exist. Do you even think? I assume so. But without a first-person verification, is there no way to know? All scientific inquiry is mediated by a first-person experience outside the realm of scientific inquiry. My mindset has always been to know the truth to the best of my ability. I would rather toss out an entire worldview and remake myself from the ground up than live in a delusional bubble. If that means abandoning traditional interpretations of Christianity for an open agnosticism, so be it. The interpretation of the story does not sufficiently match my understanding of reality, so it has to go. At 37, that meant more psychedelics, because here in my pipe was an uncharted reality that few people are talking about. Clearly, whatever reality is, it includes these experiences that can only be described as magic. Therefore, my worldview must contort to match reality, as it always has. There is always gold in the chaos, but you might have to face a dragon or two first.